I saw in the Russian Orthodox Church the traditional. It was probably something that I'd been searching for up until then and didn't fully know quite what it was. It brought me head-on in collision with the whole idea of tradition with a capital T. I remember the Archbishop asking me to compose a setting of the liturgy without knowing anything about how liturgical music was written in the Orthodox Church, and it caused an uproar in the Church. And I wrote a kind of Stravinskian setting of the liturgy with a kind of studied antiquity. Everybody came up to me saying, where's tradition in your music? We don't hear anything, it's all your own music. This event brought me face to face with the concept of tradition.
What if music could be a window to heaven? What if a composer could craft not just melodies and harmonies, but sonic spaces that function as portals to the divine? In the landscape of 20th century music, a world often defined by intellectual complexity, dissonance, and the anxieties of a secular age, one figure stands apart as a profound and beautiful anomaly. Sir John Tavener was a man of startling paradoxes, a 6'6", otherworldly figure with shoulder-length hair who looked more like a desert mystic than a classical composer. He was an avant-garde prodigy championed by the Beatles, a darling of the modernist establishment who burst onto the scene as the musical discovery of the year. Yet, at the height of his early fame, he turned his back on the very world that had celebrated him. He embarked on a spiritual quest that would lead him to a sound that was ancient, radically simple, and imbued with a stillness that felt both timeless and utterly new. To truly understand the astonishingly beautiful and absolute genius of Sir John Tavener's music, one must understand a single pivotal event: his conversion to the Russian Orthodox Church in 1977. This was not merely a change in personal belief. It was the cataclysmic event that reforged his entire artistic universe. It provided him with a new purpose, a new language, allowing him to create a form of sacred art he explicitly called icons in sound. This analysis will argue that Tavener's music is not simply spiritual in a vague New Age sense. It is a direct and rigorous translation of the deepest, most specific tenets of Eastern Orthodox theology into musical form. To hear his work is to witness the architecture of faith made audible, to experience the core Orthodox concepts of iconography, divine transformation, and the unknowable mystery of God as they are woven into melody, harmony, and most importantly, silence. The initial impression of Tavener's post-conversion music is one of sublime simplicity. It has been described as minimalist, accessible, and intensely beautiful. Beneath the surface, however, lies a profound and disciplined structure. As Tavener himself cautioned, there's nothing easy about achieving simplicity. The apparent minimalism is not a lack of ideas, but a hard-won spiritual and aesthetic asceticism. It is a deliberate emptying of the self to make room for the divine. Beneath the serene surfaces of works like The Lamb and Protecting the Veil lies a complex framework built on the ancient foundations of Byzantine modal systems, the ritual forms of Orthodox liturgy, and a sophisticated theological vision. This exploration is a journey to peel back the layers of that astonishing beauty, to reveal the genius of its construction, to move beyond passive listening and become an active participant in an act of intellectual and spiritual discovery. Before Sir John Tavener became a vessel for divine stillness, he was a firebrand of the musical avant-garde. Born in London in 1944 into a musical Presbyterian family, he began composing as a child and quickly established himself as a formidable talent on piano and organ. His time at the Royal Academy of Music saw him study under respected composers like Sir Lennox Berkeley, but his true arrival on the world stage was explosive. In 1968, the premiere of his dramatic cantata, The Whale, by the London Sinfonietta, was a sensation. This avant-garde retelling of the story of Jonah, heavily influenced by the sound worlds of Igor Stravinsky and Olivier Messiaen, captured the iconoclastic spirit of the late 1960s. The work was so electrifying that it caught the attention of Ringo Starr, leading to its release on the Beatles' record label, Apple Records, a rare and remarkable crossover that placed the 24-year-old classical composer at the very heart of the cultural zeitgeist. Subsequent works like the Celtic Requiem in 1969, which audaciously combines the Latin Mass with children's games, further cemented his reputation as one of the most exciting and innovative creative talents of his generation. Yet, even as the secular world celebrated his iconoclasm, Tavener was experiencing a profound spiritual crisis. He was growing increasingly disillusioned with the trajectory of Western culture, art, and religion. This was not a vague dissatisfaction, but a deep-seated conviction that the West had fundamentally lost its way. He came to believe that the Western Christian Church had become a corrupted and corrupting force. Having explored Roman Catholicism, he was ultimately repulsed by what he perceived as its legalistic stress on punishment and hell. More fundamentally, this spiritual malaise was connected to his identity as an artist. He saw that the sacred had been pushed out gradually by the domination of the ego in Western civilization. This manifested in the art world as a fixation on the idea of the artist as an individual genius, a concept he found almost idolatrous. The post-Renaissance tradition of the composer as a heroic figure, expressing personal passions and intellectual prowess through ever more complex music, felt hollow to him. He was searching for a tradition that inverted this hierarchy, one that prioritized the divine over the human, timeless truth over individual expression, and contemplation over ego-driven drama. He was searching for a sacred foundation upon which he could build a new kind of art. His search culminated in 1977, when, at the age of 33, John Tavener was received into the Russian Orthodox Church. This was not a sudden decision, but the end of a long pilgrimage. He had first been introduced to the faith in Greece through his first wife, the ballerina Victoria Aragopoulou, and was guided in his journey by seminal figures like Metropolitan Anthony of Syros, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church in Britain. For Tavener, this was not an intellectual conversion alone, it was a profound, intuitive homecoming. He would later say of his first experience in an Orthodox service, "I knew I had come home." This conversion was the single most important event in his creative life. It was not a retreat from music, but a radical refounding of it on an entirely new basis. His faith had become the bedrock of his art. As he affirmed, "The fact that I accepted orthodoxy is highly significant, and so is the fact that my music is inspired by orthodoxy." The very act of composition was transformed. It ceased to be an act of self-expression and became, in his own words, an act of prayer, a way to feel close to God. His conversion was therefore not just a change in religious affiliation, but a fundamental rejection of the core principles of post-Enlightenment Western artistry. The entire model of the artist's role in society had to be re-evaluated. He saw the Western ideal of the composer as an ego-driven genius, and he found an alternative in the Orthodox model of the iconographer, a humble, often anonymous artisan working within a strict sacred tradition, not to express a personal vision, but to act as a clear channel for the divine. This philosophical shift demanded a corresponding musical shift. The complex, dramatic, and often dissonant language of the Western avant-garde was inextricably linked to the very ego that he was now seeking to dissolve. To become a sonic iconographer, he had to shed that language. His subsequent turn towards a sound characterized by simplicity, stasis, and contemplative beauty was not merely a stylistic choice. It was a necessary act of spiritual asceticism, a musical manifestation of his new, humbler identity as an artist in service to God. To hear Sir John Tavener's music as he conceived it, to move beyond a surface-level appreciation of its beauty to grasp the genius of its construction, we must first learn the theological language he was speaking. His compositions after 1977 are not simply inspired by his faith, they are structured by it. The pillars of his musical world are the foundational concepts of Eastern Orthodox theology. By understanding these ideas, we gain a toolkit for listening, a key to unlock the profound meaning embedded in the notes and, crucially, in the silences. In the Western tradition, religious art is often seen as alliterative or decorative. In Eastern Orthodoxy, the sacred icon holds a far more profound and functional role. An icon is not a mere picture. It is understood to be a window to the divine. It is a point of spiritual contact, a channel through which the grace and presence of the depicted holy figure, Christ, the Theotokos, otherwise known as the Mother of God, or the saints, are made manifest to the worshipper. For this reason, Orthodox Christians do not worship the physical object of wood and paint. Rather, their veneration passes through the icon to the holy person it represents. This sacred function dictates the very manner of an icon's creation. Iconographers do not seek to impose their individual artistic style or express a personal vision. Instead, they work as humble conduits within a strict set of ancient established conventions and theological guidelines, ensuring continuity and doctrinal accuracy. This traditionally is not a creative limitation but a spiritual discipline, preserving the icon's function as a true window to heaven. Even the use of colour is a rich symbolic language. Shimmering gold leaf is not for decoration, but to represent divine light and uncreated glory. Celestial blue signifies the heavenly realm, and deep red represents the earthly, the human, and the blood of sacrifice. This conception of the artist as a humble channel and of colour and form as a sacred, symbolic language would become central to Tavener's musical philosophy. At the very heart of the Orthodox understanding of salvation lies the concept of theosis, a Greek word that can be translated as deification or divinization. This is the ultimate purpose of human life, a transformative process through which a person becomes, by grace, more and more like God, ultimately partaking in the divine nature itself. The doctrine is famously summarized in a line from the 4th century church father, St. Athanasius of Alexandria. God became man, so that man might become God. The incarnation of Christ, in which the divine and human natures were perfectly united, is what makes this astonishing transformation possible for humanity. Crucially, theosis is not a one-time event or a legal declaration of salvation. It is a lifelong and indeed eternal journey of growth and transformation. It is a dynamic process that requires what Orthodox theology calls synergy, the cooperation and interplay between divine grace and human free will. God offers the gift of deification, but humans must freely accept it and actively participate in the process through spiritual practices such as prayer, fasting, repentance, and participation in the sacraments of the Church, especially the Eucharist. The visual metaphor for this arduous journey is often the icon of the ladder of divine ascent, which depicts monks climbing towards Christ, with some succeeding and others falling away, illustrating the effort required in this spiritual pilgrimage. While Western theology has often emphasized a cataphatic or positive approach, making affirmations about what God is, the Orthodox tradition places a profound emphasis on apophatic theology, also known as viva negativa, or negative way. This is the understanding that God in his ultimate essence is fundamentally unknowable, ineffable, and beyond all human language, thought, and comprehension. We can more truthfully say what God is not than what he is. As St. John of Damascus wrote, God is infinite and incomprehensible, and all that is comprehensible about him is his infinity and incomprehensibility. To navigate this mystery, Orthodox theology makes a crucial distinction between God's unknowable essence, ousia, and his knowable energies, energia. We can never grasp what God is in his core being, but we can directly experience his actions in the world. His grace, his love, his light, his creative power. These energies are not something separate from God. They are the uncreated ways in which the transcendent God reaches out to and interacts with his creation. This theological framework leads not to intellectual speculation, but to a spirituality of stillness and contemplation. True knowledge of God is not to be found in rational proofs, but in the direct, experiential encounter with his energies, an encounter that is cultivated in the silence of contemplation, and through practices like hesychasm, the discipline of unceasing prayer of the heart. These three theological pillars, the icon as the window, theosis as the journey, and apophatism as a way of knowing, do not exist in isolation. They form a perfectly interconnected system that provides a complete blueprint for Tavener's mature musical project. The apophatic understanding of God's unknowable essence dictates what his music cannot and should not do. It cannot attempt to define or describe God through complex ego-driven structures. This theological necessity is what underpins his move towards minimalism, stasis, and the profound use of silence. By emptying the music of human willfulness, an apophatic space is created. It is within this sacred silence that God's divine energies can be perceived and experienced by the listener. This experience of divine energy is the very engine of theosis, the transformative journey toward God. Finally, the music itself, by creating this contemplative space and facilitating this spiritual journey, becomes precisely what Tavener intended: a functional, sonic icon. A window through which the listener can come into contact with the divine and begin their own process of transformation. His entire musical output can thus be understood as the creation of meticulously crafted, astonishingly beautiful tools for spiritual work. Armed with this theological toolkit, we can now approach Sir John Tavener's music not just as listeners, but as initiates. His conversion did not simply give him new subjects to write about, it gave him an entirely new definition of what music is and what a composer does. He began to see himself as an iconographer who uses sound instead of wood and paint. His stated goal was to create a lyrical icon in sound. This was not a loose metaphor. It meant a wholesale adoption of the principles of Orthodox iconography and their direct translation into compositional techniques. This required a rejection of the developmental, narrative-driven forms that have dominated Western music since the Renaissance, such as sonata form, with its inherent dialectic of conflict and resolution. In their place, Tavener embraced a musical language characterized by static, meditative forms. His music became, in his own words, highly stylized, geometrically formed, and meditative in character. Drawing inspiration from the performance of Byzantine chant, he sought to create a listening environment rather than a linear progression, a sense of habitation in a sacred space. The most crucial tool for this was the ision, the continuous, unchanging drone note that underpins much Orthodox chant, which serves as a symbol of God's eternal, timeless presence. But the resulting music is designed to stop time, to pull the listener out of the profane world of becoming and into the sacred world of being. One of Tavener's most beloved and seemingly simple works, The Lamb, is a perfect microcosm of his method. Written in a single afternoon as a birthday gift for his 3-year-old nephew, it is a setting of William Blake's famous poem from Songs of Innocence. Blake's text is itself a meditation on duality, exploring the twin identity of Christ as both the Gentile innocent animal and the divine sacrificial Lamb of God. Tavener translates this theological duality into a moment of pure sacred geometry. The piece is built on a single, tonally ambiguous melodic motif. The sopranos begin, and in the very next bar the altos enter with a direct and exact real inversion of the soprano line. The melody is literally turned upside down, a perfect mirror image. This is not merely a clever compositional trick, it is a sonic icon of the poem's central mystery. The resulting harmony is unconventional and dissonant, not out of desire for modernist shock, but as the natural mathematical consequence of this sacred, symmetrical structure. The piece further unfolds through retrograde, or playing a melodic line backwards, demonstrating a deep interest in serialist-like organisation with a deceptively simple framework. At the heart of the piece, on the word lamb, Tavener deploys what he calls the joy-sorrow chord, a specific dissonant harmony, A-C-G-B from the bass up, that he used in other works as well. This single chord perfectly encapsulates the theological paradox of the Agnus Dei, the innocence and joy of the Incarnation inextricably bound to the sorrow and mystery of the divine sacrifice. If the Lamb is a miniature icon, the protecting veil is a vast and luminous fresco. This 45-minute work for solo cello and string orchestra is one of Tavener's most significant and popular compositions, bringing him widespread international acclaim. Its inspiration is the Orthodox feast of the Protecting Veil, which commemorates a 10th century vision in which the Theotokos, the Mother of God, appeared above the people in the church at Constantinople, spreading her veil over them as a shield against an invading Saracen army. In Tavener's composition, the solo cello is the Mother of God. This is not a metaphor, it is the work's structural and spiritual premise. Tavener wrote, "The cello represents the Mother of God and never stops singing throughout." The surrounding string orchestra is conceived as a gigantic extension of her unending song. The music is structured in 8 continuous sections, a number of deep significance in Orthodox numerology. These sections correspond to the 8 tones of the Byzantine chant system and musically depicts key events or icons from Mary's life, her nativity, the Annunciation, her lament at the foot of the cross, the resurrection, and her dormition, or falling asleep. The cello part is famously demanding, often soaring in the instrument's highest, most ethereal register, what cellists call the stratosphere. This is a deliberate choice to create the luminous sound of an icon, a shimmering radiance that evokes the gold leaf of its painted counterpart. To further connect the music to its ancient roots, Tavener instructs the cellist to play certain grace notes as microtones, imitating the characteristic breaks in the voice of Byzantine chant. The result is a piece that is profoundly meditative and otherworldly, a 45-minute immersion in a timeless, sacred presence. Perhaps no piece by Tavener is more famous than Song for Athene, written as an elegy for Athene Hariades, a young family friend who died in a cycling accident. Its global fame was sealed when it was performed at the 1997 funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales, broadcast to an audience of billions. In this moment of collective grief, the world heard a perfect distillation of Tavener's mature style. The entire work is built upon an unwavering continuous drone, or ison, on the note F. In the Byzantine tradition from which Tavener draws, this drone is a direct sonic symbol of the eternal, unchanging and transcendent nature of God. It is the foundation of reality against which the drama of human life unfolds. Over this eternal drone, the choir chants a text that is itself an icon of synthesis, seamlessly weaving together lines from the Orthodox funeral service, provided by Tavener's spiritual mentor, the Orthodox nun Mother Thecla, and the final couplet of Shakespeare's Hamlet, "May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." The structure is ritualistic and cumulative. Monophonic alleluias act as pillars, separating the verses. These alleluias subtly shift modally from a radiant major to a sombre minor, and back again, musically embodying the quintessential Orthodox spiritual state of kamolophy, joyful sorrow. It is the sorrow of loss mixed with the joy of the resurrection. The The piece builds slowly to a single ecstatic climax on the words, "Come, enjoy rewards and crowns I have prepared for you," before receding once more into the quiet mystery of the eternal drone, leaving the listener in a state of profound and peaceful contemplation. Tavener's deliberate choice to use these ancient musical devices, the drone, the modal chant, the non-developmental structure, is a profound theological statement. The entire history of Western classical music since the Renaissance can be seen as a journey towards greater complexity, drama, and narrative development, mirroring a humanist worldview, focused on the individual's journey and struggles. By rejecting this musical grammar, Tavener was rejecting the worldview that produced it. He turned the static, contemplative and non-egotistical forms of Byzantine and pre-Renaissance music because their very structure is a tool for achieving the spiritual goal of Hezekiah, the inner stillness and silence required for true prayer. The Eson does not go anywhere, it simply is. Listening to it is an exercise not in following a story, but in being present to eternity. The musical form itself becomes a pathway to the divine. In the final phase of his life and work, Sir John Tavener's spiritual vision expanded into a radical and breathtaking universalism. This was not a rejection of his Orthodox faith, but rather the logical and profound culmination of its deepest principles. He began to speak of feeling terribly austere and hidebound by the tonal system of the Orthodox Church, expressing a need for his music to become more universalist, to take in other colours, other languages. This impulse led him to the study of other great world religions and to the influence of the traditionalist or perennial school of philosophy, particularly the work of the Swiss metaphysician and Sufi master Frithjof Schuon. Perennialism posits that all authentic religious traditions in their esoteric core are different paths leading to the same ultimate transcendent truth. They are different languages describing the same ineffable reality.
It was both a physical thing and a spiritual thing. I hadn't got the physical strength to do this anymore. So the music became much more concentrated and I suppose more transparent, and my attitude to religion was quite different. I'd had this I was very lucky to have this sort of inspired kind of faith, but sometimes my personal life wasn't as good as the faith might have implied. And since I've been ill, been much more caring for my children, for my wife. So in a way, I've come to understand that suffering is part of existence. Everything today tends to be on one dimension, and people, they criticize Muslims, they criticize Catholics too easily. They quick journalists jab at Catholics. Don't deal with the massive depth of Catholicism or the massive depth of Islam. And I think it's maybe there are programs that want to disprove Muhammad, but it's not just the historical dimension of religions that's important. It's the fact that it's on a different that they were speaking on a different level, and there's only one dimension in their thinking, which is historical and not mystical.
But you then you were attracted by Catholicism, but you converted to Orthodox in 1977. Yes. And since then you have sort of fused it with, am I right in thinking you fused it with Hinduism and Buddhism, or at least you've
well, I
taken
believe
elements.
All religions are equally true. It must be that. Otherwise they're all equally false. That's another perspective. But if Plato's argument that in the beginning God, once God and heaven and earth were joined, and there was only one primal being, God. Therefore, in logic, all religions must be equally true.
So you're no longer an Orthodox?
Yes, you have to be something, I think, in this life, because it's a fallen world. I mean, you can't be a Hindu and a Muslim and a Christian all at once.
The supreme achievement of this universalist vision is Tavener's magnum opus, The Veil of the Temple. It is a work of almost unimaginable scale, a 7 to 8 hour all-night vigil designed to be performed from late evening until dawn. The piece is conceived as a literal and metaphorical journey for the listener, a pilgrimage of the soul from the darkness of the tomb and the temporal world to the binding eternal light of the resurrection. It is the ultimate expression of his belief in a unified spiritual truth. The work is a vast interwoven tapestry of sacred text and musical styles, sung in 5 languages that draws from Orthodox Christianity, Hinduism featuring an Upishan hymn, Islam, specifically the mystical tradition of Sufism, Buddhism, Judaism, and the spiritual traditions of Native Americans. The musical structure mirrors this spiritual journey. It is composed in 8 cycles, which gradually ascend in pitch and build in textual complexity, moving from the primordial darkness of the opening to the explosive climax known as the rending of the veil at the work's conclusion. This is not merely concert music. It is a functional ritual and immersive environment designed to effect a genuine spiritual transformation in the participant. Sir John Tavener's life and work represent a monumental achievement in modern culture. In an age of increasing secularization and artistic fragmentation, he forged a musical language that was simultaneously ancient and modern, deeply personal yet universally resonant, and profoundly theological, yet accessible to millions of listeners, both religious and secular. He did not simply write religious music. He sought to reconsecrate the very act of listening, creating sonic spaces for contemplation, introspection, and the spiritual experience. He reminded the world that music could be a form of prayer. His legacy is evident in the holy minimalist school he helped to pioneer, and in the work of composers he influenced, such as Eric Whitacre, who spoke of Tavener's spacious, deeply authentic sound worlds. Yet his truest and most enduring legacy lies not in his influence on other composers, but in the direct experience he offers every listener. His music is more than concert hall repertoire. It has become a tool for healing, a soundtrack for meditation, and a source of profound peace and solace for countless people. It is a powerful reminder that in our noisy, chaotic, and distraction-filled world, one of the most radical and restorative acts is simply to be still and to listen. Tavener's entire artistic project was an attempt to empty his music of his own ego to allow something else to speak through it. As he once explained, true art is only possible through a total disillusion, at the point of nothingness when one is absolutely nothing. Only then can the Holy Spirit come and work within you. To listen to the music of Sir John Tavener is to be invited into that sacred space of disillusion, to learn to hear the divine resonance in the silence between the notes. It is to understand, in the deepest sense, the truth of the words of St. Augustine, who wrote that those who sing pray twice. Tavener's astonishingly beautiful music is, in the end, one long, magnificent, and unending prayer.